All right. What is going on, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic today. Today we've got SPL rankings the day before SPL starts. These are going to be as up-to-date as possible. We're going to go over the teams, the players. We're going to give you guys predictions for week 1, and then we're going to give you predictions over the entire fall phase. Yeah, let's just jump right in. It does look pretty small still.
That's what she said.
Good baby. So going over all 8 teams, it's going to be a little bit of a task because we've had some changes and we haven't been able to see these teams in action yet. And we've had some teams starting really strong, or I guess ending really strong at the end of last phase. Dragons ended really strong, winning the phase of Scream as the new jungler. The Kings looked good as always. Some other teams have fallen off a little bit. Scarabs with some changes. Bolts with some changes. Levi's with some changes. So it's going to be a lot of fun going through all this. So we'll start with the Bolts. The Bolts lost Haddix, and they gained probably one of the most known players in all of SMITE history, or like top 5. They picked up Baskin. Now, the problem with Baskin is we haven't seen much of Baskin over the past... I just said Baskin like 9 times. We haven't seen Baskin much over the past 3 years. He's come kind of in and out to like make a surprise appearance for a Worlds run, and then he'll like kind of dip back into the shadows and not play the next year. And then he'll come back out again for the next year, and then he'll dip back into the shadows. It's a bit weird to rate the Bolts, but I think if you look at the rest of their team and you look how they played the map, a lot of the times they were playing through their mid-jungle and their solo lane. Their mid-jungle is where they put the most of their amount of pressure in, a most amount of their good picks. They tried to get really good high aggro prio mid-junglers so that Ven and Laz could win them the games. They'd pick Haddix a lot of the time, either just a super strong god that had very few counters, or they just leave him the counter pickup. I really don't think Haddix is what made this team. I think a lot of the times when they looked the best, it was they would stomp the early game, and they would stomp the early game playing through Lasbra. Lasbra's best god over the past year has been Dodgy, and Dodgy is still one of his best gods, but I think that is the only god that he's looked absolutely phenomenal on. I think Rat he's looked solid on. He's had some good games on some other gods. I think his Lance looks okay. But I think Dodgy is where he kind of just makes these plays. I still think that they're going to be lacking a little bit not having Haddix. He wouldn't really lose lane. He'd win lane a lot. If Baskin doesn't come into the phase looking exceptional, I think there's a good chance that this Bolt team gets a good amount worse. But I think their floor is pretty limited because I think Ven and Lasbra are going to be okay. I don't think Baskin's going to look that bad. I think a lot of it still kind of goes to that dual lane of how well can Barra play, how well can Jake play, how well can their 2v2 play. If they fall behind, can they live? If they get ahead, can they not throw? Stuff like that. I think they'll be a pretty meh team. I don't think they'll be that bad. There is a chance that they fall down into weak, but I don't think they have that high of a ceiling. I think they're pretty limited on what they can do. And this is not for Worlds. This is just for Phase 3. For Worlds, we'll have a new tier list because I'll need to see these 9 weeks of action. Cause I don't even know how many weeks there are, but I need to see some action before I can put a good opinion out there. Looking at the Dragons, I think it's safe to say the Dragons are looking like the best team in the league. Scream back in the jungle for this team, pairing back up with Mike and Pandacat. I think they have all but shored up their weaknesses that they kind of had with Sam. You can kind of just tell that when they're making plays, they're all on the same page, even if sometimes the plays are not very good. You'll see Scream die sometimes where it's like, why is he dying there? But it doesn't really matter because his team ends up wiping the fight anyway, or he goes in too early, or he doesn't go in at all. There's still some miscommunication problems, but the more they play together, the more that Fine and Scream play together, the more their dive is going to look better. The more Pegon and Scream play together in that 2v2, the better their 2v2 is going to look. The more time Scream is ganking that dual lane, even though he's ganked him like 1,000 times over the past 5 years, they're just going to look better. And there's no reason to think that this team is going to slow down, especially when you look at the top teams elsewhere. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to catch up to them during this phase. J Dragons I have dominant. Next up, I have the Kings. I think it's safe to say that the Kings are a solid team. I think they are kind of your baseline SMITE team where if you're a bad team, you're going to lose to them. If you're a good team, you're going to have to fight with them and you're going to have to compete and you're going to have to play well. Otherwise, you're just going to lose. They are very good at punishing mistakes. They've had not made a change in the 2 years that they've been a team, and they've always looked super strong. They're down to just early pick their solo laner and just run through Harry, run through Twig. They like getting BMT as comfort picks when he's playing on ping, but now he's back off ping. So his God pool just opens up a lot. And then their 2v2 is just really strong. I think a lot of their team play and a lot of their strengths come from playing around net and come from playing around genetics. And I think those two look really good together. I still think that they are a step below the Dragons. They have no true like absolute superstar, which it feels like the Dragons have. I think Pegon's a superstar. I think Fine's a superstar. I think this Kings team is just a bunch of really talented, smart players that play well together. Occasionally, Netrioid steps up and becomes that superstar. Occasionally, BMT steps up and becomes that superstar. But they don't really have like that same like consistent superstar like the Dragons have. So I'm going to put the Kings in solid. Now looking at the Levi's. The Levi's ended up dropping Yarkor at the end of Phase 2. They replaced him with Haddix. Now, Yarkor was not a problem for this team. It seemed like the team just overall was just all frustrated. They just looked like they weren't enjoying what they were doing, and they weren't enjoying kind of playing the game or being a team. And they looked like they just kind of needed to make some changes. Whether it was them talking out and deciding on Yarkor, or it was just a big disagreement sometime and Yarkor is the one left on the outskirts. Whatever it was, something needed to change, and they switched up Yarkor with Haddix. And I think that is about as even of a trade as you can get. I think when Yarkor looks on, he looks fantastic. I think when Haddix looks on, he looks fantastic. And they're both just uber consistent players. Their god pools are pretty common too. They play like just the best gods that they can. Arthur's, Camo when he's in meta, Guan Yu, stuff like that. I think this team will be slightly better than they were at the end of Phase 2, but not because they got better, just because they needed to switch up something in their environment. And I think this will give them that little kick. I think Haddix makes this team a solid team. I can see a world where they just drop off. They just continue just swirling down the toilet and they just eventually just flush. Currently, right now, I think they're still a solid team. Oni Warriors. I think this is a team that is possibly can be put in any tier. There are sometimes when they look dominant, sometimes when they look solid, sometimes when they look meh, and then sometimes when they just look weak and you just can't even tell what they're doing. A lot of it comes around how do they play around Nika. They're really, really happy to sit back, let the game come to them, play for the late game. They want Dardes to get his farm. They want Cubo to get his farm, Nika get his farm, Vogue get his farm, Neil not get his farm. Don't give Nika or Neil any farm. None whatsoever. But if they do get to that late game, they team fight very well. I think they're in a meh tier currently, but they do have like that chance to move up. If the meta changes where it's just super late game focus, I think this team will actually get a lot better. But through their early games, they're just reliant on Cubo and Nika to kind of get a lead. Dardes isn't uber proactive. Vote's not uber proactive. Neil can be uber proactive, but he needs to kind of get a lead through like a kill in the laning phase, which is very, very unlikely in Smite. I think they are on the top side of meh, though. I think they are better than the Bolts. And these will be left to right. So I think Dragon's the most dominant. Solid. Kings are more solid than the Levi's. And then Warriors are more meh than the Bolts. So I think they do have like that potential to move up, but they also have potential to move down. Depending on how the meta shapes up, they could move either way, but currently I'm going to put them on top of meh. Scarabs, a little tough talking about them. They have a player role swapping. Yark's going to support. They replaced me on the team. I think that their problems laid outside of me. I know kind of like a little bit more of like the interior workings, and I think now that it's happened, it's been a little while. It kind of makes sense for something to be changed. My opinion, they went the wrong way, but of course it's going to be my opinion. But I still think that they didn't correct kind of the mistakes that they had and the mistakes that they were making. They're a very non-vocal team. A lot of stuff is left up in the air. They're really 50-50 on calls. There's no real leader. Even when I was there, that's something that I could have definitely done better. They just don't really mesh together. It's kind of just a bunch of players that are just put on a team and they're just trying to play. There really is no direction. Nobody really has like true opinions on stuff. If they can fix that stuff, maybe they can improve. But I don't think Yarkor is the type of player to improve this team. Maybe they just need a little bit more mechanical skill. Always possible, but I think that they are on the bottom side of weak. Next up, Titans. I think the Titans are another solid team. This team kind of comes down to, are they winning? If they are winning, they ride momentum and they continue winning. If they're losing, they crash and burn. It really comes down to just how consistent can this team be? Can their mental stay strong? Can they make it through this phase into Worlds riding a hot streak? Because they have potential to win, but they have like this clashing of personalities on that team where some are a little bit more assertive, aggressive, some are more passive. Their ideas always don't match up. Their way they want to play the game doesn't always match up. And they do play like a wonky game of Smite. It's a lot wonkier than their teams. So if that style works for them, they'll start stomping. Other teams don't really know how to match it. But I think they have to reel that in a little bit and just get back to like a basic Smite game. I think that will benefit them a lot. But I also think if they can get that wonky style working and they can make it really nice, I think that they could actually pass up a lot of these teams and go into the dominant, because they are very hard to play against if they find this weird style that you don't really know how to counter. And then lastly, Valks. I think the Valks are the bottom side of meh. I think they're an okay team. They've been slowly improving all throughout the year. And I think depending on how they can just get their comps, I swear a lot of the times you see them draft, and it was mostly at the beginning of the year, but sometimes in the middle of the year, their drafts were so terrible. Maybe it was a scrims thing that they just thought something from scrims, and the scrims just didn't work exactly how they wanted to, and so it led to their comps just being weird. But if they can get their picks and bans down, get them into a point where they can hold teams kind of at a point of you have to give us this or you have to play against this while you have something weaker. If they can get to that point, I think this team can actually be really good. A little bit of it kind of depends on Kirmi also. How does Kirmi play on this team? How is he playing on these games? The rest of the team kind of funnels through Kirmi, funnels through Benny in the late game. And I think that they should start playing through Wowie and Gamma a little bit more. I think Wowie and Gamma, a lot of the times with Kirmi, are the reason that these teams, that they're winning these games. I think Aqua just plays a super basic, hard to beat style that's not going to win you the games, but not going to lose you the games. And I think Benny, a lot of the time, is just a really good farmer, and he scales into the late game if he's not on run it down mode. If he can just reel that in, they can play a really simple style of Smite, play through Kirmi, play through their dual lane. I think this team has a really good chance. I do think that they're kind of limited, unlike the Warriors, to be in this dominant. I think they need another year, but I think they can make it into the solid tier and put in some work this year. But this is my tier list for the rest of phase 3. And now we're going to be moving on to the week 1 schedule. So looking at the schedule, also ignore my deserter. I dodged 3 games today, all an accident, all not my fault. 100% not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. Looking at the first game, Warriors, Levi's. I think this will be a great start for both of these teams to kind of see where they stack up to each other. I do think the Levi's have a slight edge here. I think they usually come in a little bit hotter than the Warriors do off of breaks, but I do think both of these teams are usually slower off breaks. I just think I value the Levi's replacement, hyping them up a little bit more for the start of this phase than I do for the Warriors just to start another phase. Bolts and Titans. Titans, I just have to believe in. I think this team is really good. I don't think this Bolts have that same swagger that the Titans have. As long as they have this decent idea of picks and bans and this decent idea of the meta, I think the Titans should be slightly valued over the Bolts. These next two, I think, should be pretty big blowouts. I think this is going to be my top 2 teams versus my bottom 2 teams. I think both of these should be 2-0, 2-0. Going to these ones quick, I think this will be a 2-0, and I think this one will be a 2-1. Going on to Sunday, Levi's Titans. Another one where it's a test for both of them. Titans versus Levi's. I think this will go 3 games, or it'll be just an absolute stomp both ways, or whichever way it goes. Probably in favor of the Titans, so I'm going to give a slight edge to the Titans, but I think this one will be really close. Bolt Scarabs, a battle of like kind of the more lower end teams just to see kind of where they stack up at the beginning of the phase. I do think I value the Bolts a little bit more. I think they have just more team-wide synergy than the Scarabs do, especially replacing your support. It's really hard to get on the same page with that support. So I'm going to lean Bolts, probably 2-0. And then probably the game of the week, Dragons Kings. This is the finals, baby. This is the finals from phase 2. Dragons ended up winning it, and I got the Dragons here again. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if the Kings win this. Even if the Kings win this, I still think the Dragons are a better team. It's just like that hangover after you win something. Maybe the Dragons decide to slow down a little bit, stop scrimming as much, take a little break. And the Kings have just been scrimming a lot. I haven't really kept up too much on how much people are scrimming. I know they just started like last week or a couple weeks ago. But if the Dragons kind of didn't put it in drive yet and they just have it neutral cruising down the hill, like I wouldn't be too surprised if the Kings win this. But that's what I got for week 19, I guess it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys like the SPL content, let me know in the comments below. I can do more of this. I just don't know how interested you guys are in the SPL. I don't know if you guys are here for the guides as much or whatever. But if you guys have anything you want, toss it in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. See you guys again next time. Peace.